And welcome to another Round the Rotary podcast. And me, your host, JP Warren. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We know you have your choice of podcasts out there, and thank you for tuning into the number one oil and gas podcast out there, per my wife. And before we begin, I got to say that Round the Rotary podcast is brought to you by Capital Petroleum Consultants. CPC specializes in project engineering and well site supervision in all disciplines of oil and gas industry. Contact us through www.capitalpetroleumconsultants.com to see what CPC can do for you today. And with us in the studio today, we have an old buddy of mine, Drew Limbacher. I'm finally glad to get you in here, man. You and I kind of like ebb and flow. Like we'll like always hang out, then we don't, then we do, then we don't. But I'm glad to see you here. I'm glad I know you've been working hard lately in this new venture you've been doing. I can't wait to hear about it. Again, this is Drew Limbacher, the Vice President of Business Development and Engineering at Vencer Energy.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And so I have been listening to your podcast, and I definitely have a few friends and people I know that have been on,
That's
and
right.
I love harassing them about it. Cody Rodriguez is one of them.
Oh, I love Cody.
So hopefully he's listening to this, and I get a chance to harass him.
Well, I'll tell you what, before we start harassing Cody, because I want to harass Cody around like minute 37. I want Cody to listen to this entire thing.
Agreed.
All right.
Totally agree.
So we'll give him a shout out here towards the middle of it or the end of it to make sure he's a true listener. Okay.
I agree.
That's the goal. So, Drew, before we get kicked off, I mean, I like going into background stuff, but let's talk about Limbacher. Where's that from? Where's your clan from?
So it is a very German name.
It's German?
So
okay.
Absolutely. And so my dad is from Ohio, and the last name Limbacher is very German. I think
So you took your dad's last name. Good for you.
Thanks. I think my great grandpa is actually from Germany on my dad's side. So
Really?
it's very much removed. And so I have a dad who is Limbacher from Germany, from Ohio, and then I have a mom who is from Jackson, Mississippi. Pivito is the last name.
Pivito.
It's a mix. And so they met at LSU.
Okay.
And it kind of went from there. But
So your dad and my old mentor, my old boss, Bubba Smith over at Penergy, they're tight. They're boys.
That's right. That's right. So he would be old school, but he would be a long-term oil and gas person.
You can say old school.
The Burlington Resources Mafia, that whole deal. And so from Meridian Energy to Burlington Resources too, and he's done several things afterwards. But yeah, so I think he knows Bubba and probably a lot of other people.
Oh yeah. So you grew up around so Ohio, is that a big German group up there?
So I think there is a definite contingency that is German that went to Ohio and settled there.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, because I know Texas has a huge German Czech population as well. I don't know, Polish as well, maybe. I don't know.
No, that's right. So Polish. So if I go to Slitter, so if you're going to Slitterbahn, that's Polish, right?
I think so.
I think that counts.
I think so.
I agree. That's basically Germany, depending on your time frame in the 1940s. I think that's all Germany. That all counts.
Literally, I know history. In Germany back in the 1940s, they would go to water parks to blow off steam.
No, I think that's right.
Okay,
that's
right,
correct,
exactly.
Yeah.
So, Drew, why don't you just kick off, man? Just tell. So, you grew up in the oil field, around the oil field with your dad, right? And is this something that you wanted to do, or is it kind of were you pushing into by your dad or family or influences or anything like that? But what brought you where you're sitting at today? Why don't you just start us off?
Yeah, sure. So I was where I wasn't going to go into the oil field actually, and so I wanted to do something different.
Like what?
And so and different being away from where I was. And so I was in high school, and I was raised here in Houston. I went to Klein High School.
Okay.
And all my friends seemed like went to A&M or University of Texas. I ended up going to OU just for something different. Didn't know anybody. Started off in mechanical engineering, and I just wanted to see where it went, and just wanted a fresh start. And I did my first. I ended up. Somebody convinced me to try petroleum engineering, just to think about it.
Well, what do you mean someone? Was that a professor, or is it like your buddies in school, or what?
No, it was that, and then it was frankly some different scholarship opportunities.
Okay.
A few other things that said, maybe you should actually think about this. So I did. I did in my first internship with ConocoPhillips.
Okay.
It was offshore, so offshore being with Conoco, offshore being Gulf of Mexico.
Deep water.
So it started more inland waters than
Okay.
deep water, although we did a little bit of kind of more deep water. But I say inland waters, so we did an internship on my first summer.
So you took a crew boat out there in the water.
That's right. So Homa was the base, but it was
Right.
really we launched out of Cocodrie.
Okay.
And so from Cocodrie, we did these inland waters, and I stayed in a double wide trailer with 12 Cajun guys, which was an experience in and of itself. And it was awesome. And so it was 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. I was 18 at the time. I started bringing fishing poles with me, and so we'd work 14-hour days. And then at the end of the day, they'd hang spotlights from these separator platforms, and
Yep.
we'd just go
Yep.
fishing at the end of the day.
Yep.
And I was like, this is cool.
This is work.
This is a fun industry.
Yeah, I get to work hard and play hard. I love it. I love it.
I could make this work. And so I did that first internship, and then so not only was it fun and interesting work, especially on the engineering side, but I mean it paid well. It was a career. It was people that I liked that were down to earth.
Yeah.
I said, I think I could do this. Like, this is okay. Like I set against it just because I had family in the industry. And I said, no, this is.
Were you hesitant before you took that internship, or is this one of those things like, oh, the scholarships and all that stuff? I have to do this internship before I decide what I want to do. Like, so.
No, that's right.
So this is your first kind of exposure to the oil and gas industry. Well, besides your dad, but I'm talking about like actually getting in the field, working with guys and girls that are out there.
No, that's right. And so I said, like, this is good. Like, I'll get some experience and I'll give you some engineering thing, and I'll kind of keep taking steps towards. And I got out there. I met the people, especially Southern Louisiana people, and I said, this is amazing. This is
I think that's literally kind of the only thing that has like kept me here this long is the people. You know what I mean? Like it's all of our skills and knowledge. It's all transferable. You know what I mean? But it's the people that keeps us here.
Agreed.
So
I did that. It was amazing. I actually switched my career from mechanical engineering to actually specifically to petroleum engineering.
Okay.
Continued on with that in the University of Oklahoma, and ended up graduating. And so and jumping into the industry and with High Mount, which was kind of Dominion splitting off their assets at the time, and kind of went from there. But that was how I got started. It was really that first internship that said, hey, this is pretty fun. This is okay.
I'll tell you one thing: the stories and the characters that are out there is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So you graduated, then with a PE? Then where'd you go?
So that's right. So I did petroleum engineering. I also did an internship with Devon at the time, and a smaller company. My last internship with a smaller company, kind of Dominion/High Mount. So Dominion being the large. So if you go to the East Coast and you go to a large electrical provider, Dominion's it. I mean, it's a very large group.
Okay.
And they had a lot of upstream assets for a long period of time. And at some point, roughly around 2008, they decided to divest a lot of that. And so Lynn and High Mount took most of the upstream assets.
So when did you graduate? What year?
It's 2010.
Okay, 2010. Okay.
That's right.
All right.
And so right as Dominion is divesting a lot of those assets, High Mount is just getting started. It's basically a startup with the Dominion upstream assets and a lot of Dominion personnel. And I met that, and I liked the startup feel. Like, I liked the idea of getting to look at a lot of different things.
That excited you.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I liked the personnel that were involved in Oklahoma City at the time, and the people that were starting it. And I thought it was really exciting. And so I actually ended up taking a job, and that's kind of my first one. So I started off in operations, specifically facilities and production engineering with High Mount.
Okay.
And so their main opportunity was in kind of South Texas, or I say South Permian, so Val Verde Basin, Sonora, Texas, Canyon Sands, and then we ended up expanding from there and doing a lot of other things. But I jumped into operations with High Mount E&P right out of school.
So did you enjoy your first role in the oil and gas industry?
I thought it was awesome.
Okay. All right.
I thought it was really cool. So the Conoco experience convinced me to go into oil and gas, and then definitely High Mount convinced me to stay. I love my bosses. Guys that have moved on to other things, but John Argo at Continental Resources now.
John's a huge listener to the podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure. We're going to confirm that. I'm going to send this to him at some point. Ian Yingling, who's done private equities on the InCap side, he's with Black Swan. He's in the program.
Yeah, okay.
There's several other guys that have done a lot on the High Mount side that I just enjoyed working with, and because they were entrepreneurs, because they thought about the world differently, because I just thought this business was really exciting, and High Mount convinced me of that.
Did you get a chance to, I guess, be around them and kind of get in their way of their because it's different when you go from a huge company where you actually just have one role. Your job is to drill wells. Your job is to complete your job. I feel like at a company that's a startup with all this stuff, I mean, did you get a chance to kind of sit in the room and I guess kind of pick their brains and kind of learn from them on how they viewed, how they wear different hats and the entrepreneurial thing and all that? I mean, how was that for you?
No, that's why I liked it. I mean, so High Mount, so I did the internship with Conoco and Devon, and those are incredible companies. But what I really liked about High Mount was the startup feel. You need to be really good at what you do, but we need you to wear lots of hats. And this is a startup, so we need you to figure out how to make money and be creative. And I feel like the people I worked with there had the right personalities to figure that out.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I loved about it. That's what made me really enjoy the business was I got into that, and it wasn't just this is the one thing you do, and you're going to be really good at this one thing, but that's really all we want you to do. It was find me a way to make money or be creative, and we'll listen to you.
And so you were in Oklahoma at the time?
That's right. And so we were Oklahoma City, so really northern Oklahoma City. So this is irrelevant, but Quail Springs Parkway, right next to Quail Springs Mall.
Let me pump the brakes right now. Nothing's irrelevant. Everything is relevant. Okay. All right. So I don't feel like I have to tell you that, but everything's relevant.
That's right. So just west of Quail Springs Mall,
okay.
There was a building, Quail Springs Parkway, that was split between Lynn and High Mount, and it was the High Mount guys. We were absolutely in Oklahoma City, Edmond area, and anyways, yeah. So it was. I love the people I work with.
Okay. All right, so you still keep in touch with them, I assume. So anyway, so you're
right.
doing this. So how long were you at High Mount for, doing this operational money, whatever you were doing? I mean, how long are you there for?
That's right. So I was there for about 5 years, and really I would have been happy to stay there until we sold. And so it was a private company. It was backed by the Tisch family, who owns Lowe's Hotels.
Okay.
And so Lowe's is a high-end hotel chain, and they own a lot of other things. But the point is, they have a lot of investments. And so they owned High Mount, and at the time they said, at kind of middle of 2014, they said, now's probably maybe a good time to get out of the business.
Oh, it was in the middle of 2014 before
the big crash.
Before November 29th.
That's right. Yep. And so we put it on the market, and so I went through a lot of operational roles, ended up in Reservoir and then A&D.
Okay.
Was on the sales team especially with John Argo and Ian Yingling. Sold to a company called Intervest, which I'm sure we'll get into in a minute. And so here in Houston, and then we sold in the middle of 2014. That's right. And then
I'm just flabbergasted. You bring that company up like no one's ever a company called Intervest.
Yeah, it's a big.
Okay.
It's a big
people
group.
know Intervest. Okay,
that's right.
Okay, go on.
And so we sold to them, and I owned a house at the time, and so my wife and I were planning to stay there. We're happy in Oklahoma. We're going to move into that house. We sold, and then, at the end of 2014, there was a big oil crash.
It was the Friday after
yes.
after Thanksgiving. OPEC had their meeting, and let's open the taps.
Yeah, let's just grass the whole market.
Let's just burn it.
Fun.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. So that happened, and then so I ended up taking a job with Intervest, and so it was my wife right before we got married, and so I basically was kind of trying to convince her that, hey, we should move and kind of restart our life here in Houston.
And she also has a career as well. So what was she doing at this time?
That's right. So she had worked. So she went to school at OU. That's where we met.
Did you all meet in class or what?
No, we met at a bar, and I was embarrassed, and so I was incredibly embarrassing, but I was memorable.
That's my move. Go on.
And that was enough to give me a second date, and then it kind of just went from there.
It's all history.
And then she's like, this is okay.
Yeah. Sure, why not?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so from there, she was back in law school actually at the time.
Okay.
And so I think she was in her second year of law school when that happened, if it wasn't the first year. And I convinced her, hey, not only should you not finish here, but we should probably move down and start our life in Houston and yada, yada. Anyways. So I convinced her to change, and we ended up moving to Houston. And
so where'd she transfer to?
University of Houston.
Okay.
She actually finished her law school, her third year of law school, I'm sure, and she was very nice about it at the University of Houston. And so my pitch to her was, not only do you get to finish your third year of law school in Houston, but because we already own a house here in Oklahoma, and because I'm cheap, I'm not going to pay for a second mortgage, so you get to live with your in-laws, my parents, for a period of time.
Which isn't a bad deal, because apparently Bubba tells me your dad knows some wine, so that's not a bad thing.
That's right, it's okay. And so I convinced her that not only do you have to leave all your friends and come to Houston, we're gonna live with your in-laws, my parents for our first year of marriage, essentially, because I'm cheap, I'm gonna sell this house, and then we'll immediately move out.
I like how you put it professional. Let's live with your in-laws. No, let's live with mommy and daddy for a little bit.
Yes.
Let's live with mommy and daddy for a little bit. Yeah.
I'm not paying 2 mortgages. I don't know what you think about me.
I get that. No, I know you. I know you when it comes to frivolous spending. I get it.
That's right. So
I left a bottle of bourbon at the house.
And this is right during the oil crash, and so Edmond, Oklahoma is not an easy place to sell a house during an oil crash, actually, believe it or not. And so ended up eventually selling. We moved out. She had a blast at my parents' house. I think she was okay with that, actually. Yeah. I think she was fine.
I get it.
And so I worked for Intervest, which is an incredible company at the time. It still is an incredible company.
Thank you.
And so worked for them.
And so what were you doing at Intervest?
And so I'm sorry. So they were very nice to me. So they gave me a chance to like, look, we need you to. I told them I wanted to work A&D for them because they did a lot of deals and they're really good at it. And so
what attracted you about the A&D side of the business?
I tried to figure out what I was good at, and I think I'm a good engineer, but I'm also good at the business side of things.
Okay.
And what I'm really good at, I think, which is weird and hard to explain, is melding the engineering and the business side together. And that's a lot of A&D work, actually.
Really?
Is what that looks like, is how do I meld kind of commercial and engineering and put it together into a business? And it just seemed like it was a perfect fit. Like, not only did I enjoy it, but I think I was good at it. And anyway, and so Intervest was a great place to do that, because they were doing a lot of deals at the time, and we're a great operating company. And they said, yeah, come in, but first we need you to understand how we do things. And so their point was, put you in the mid-con. So I started off in the mid-continent with them, and they had a JOA with 4 Point at the time.
Okay.
And so got to work that and figure out how they did things and how they looked at the world. And
that was a bigger company from the startup company you were accustomed to.
No, that's right. So Intervest was a big group.
Yeah.
No, that's right. And so they gave me the opportunity to look at how they operated, how they thought about the world, and then after working kind of that mid-continent position, to move into their A&D group and say, okay, now kind of go acquire. Let's look at how we acquire things and how we kind of incorporate that into operating.
That's gotta be such a cool experience. I mean, the engineering side of the aspect, first off, is fascinating to me. I mean,
Yeah.
I understand how you guys could look downhole in the dark on a 9.5-inch hole and understand what's going on 8,000 feet in the ground. I think it's fascinating, but I think that's cool that the other side is the business side of things. The fact that you can kind of marry that or kind of be the liaison between the two. I mean, I'm sure that was a great experience on the resume level, but also on a personal growth level.
No, that's right. And that's what I liked. I mean, that's what made it fun. And so I tried to figure out, I mean, and I know it makes sense, but you should do the things that you like doing and you're good at, because that's where you'll be successful.
Yeah.
So if you try to force things that doesn't really make sense for you, but you could probably do okay at it, like you're not going
to be satisfied.
You're going to be miserable, and then you'll always just be kind of okay. But if you just do what you're good at, like there'll be things that open up.
It's going to be fun.
And that's why you have a team, and that's why you have people that fill gaps for you, and that's right. And so
did you like that? I guess the big corporate culture, life, and all that stuff.
No, I thought Intervest was an incredible place to work. I enjoyed working there. I got to see a lot of deals. I learned a lot.
Right.
That being said, I was there for about a year, and I got a call from people that used to work at High Mountain, really the principal guys that used to work at High Mountain. So it'd be Steve Hinchman, Andy Lundy, and Ellen May. They said, look, we're doing this startup, and the timing's right, and we're backed by a private equity group called InCap, and we think it's a really good opportunity to kind of go and look and acquire assets and develop them, and all this stuff makes sense. And
so you've got the experience about looking at deals and understanding what's important, what's not important.
That's right. And going back to the original thing I talked about, why I joined High Mountain, is I really like that. Like, I like the startup.
Yeah.
I like looking at lots of weird things. And the answer is, yeah, you're not totally an expert, but you need to figure this out. Like, tell me how we're going to make this work. I think that's fun.
Jump in and swim.
Yes. And so I both enjoy that, and it fits my personality, and it's kind of what I'm good at in certain aspects. And so I said, yeah.
So you went to Scala.
So that's right. So I went there.
Scala?
No, so I did. So Scala was what I said for the first 6 months, and so I was.
You know what? I feel like this is what caused. This is why we don't hang out. This is what caused our rift.
And then I was in a meeting, and somebody says, "Actually, it's Scala." I'm like, crap.
You're like, well, is it really, Chad? Is it really Scala?
It can really be whatever you want.
Yeah, enough of the lowercase a's.
That's
okay.
right. That's right. So
yeah.
We looked in the Permian. I mean, we looked at a lot of places, but we focused on the Permian. And we ended up buying a position in the Western Permian, Culberson County.
Okay.
Via, again, backed by InCap. And we ended up with about 38,000 acres. We drilled, 12 to 15 delineations and even delineation wells. And even then in the Wolf Camp, and even then a 6-well kind of pilot development program. Mm-hmm. And we were absolutely ready to develop. And then 2019 happened and 2020 happened, and commodity prices and everything else did a lot of weird things.
Yeah.
So I learned an incredible amount of information there, learned a lot from our leaders there. And then at this point, per a lot of the industry, it's like commodity prices have dropped. Like you guys are doing an incredible job, but we have to figure out a way to cut G&A and keep this thing going. And so at that time, especially after COVID, so it would be March, April, May of 2020.
Okay.
And they said, look, we're going to consolidate and we're going to kind of move the Scala team out and kind of look to do something different.
You know what's unfortunate about that, though? I mean, I got a lot of buddies, a lot of customers that are kind of, backed by these private equity companies and all this stuff. And it doesn't matter how good of a job you do. It doesn't matter how good of an engineer, how good of a management team or leadership team you do. Like, at the end of the day, like, it's not your decision. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of good people out there that did get wrapped up or consolidated or had packages let go, but it was out of their control. You know what I mean? Yeah.
No, agreed. It's
just part of the times. It's a shitty part of the times.
That's right. And it's hard to say, but it's not personal. Like, it's truly just somebody's looking at this and say, look, I have to find a way to cut costs.
Yeah.
I mean, especially thinking about May 2020. I mean, prices are down to nothing. Nobody's sure of what the next multiple years look like. Everybody has some level of RBL debt.
And mind you, oil got to negative 37 about 3 weeks before that.
Yes. Everybody has some kind of debt. And so if you're explaining to people that you're doing investments for, what do I do with this? Like, you have to do something, right? I mean, you have to take steps forward that are positive. And so to say it's not personal is an awful thing, but it's true. Like, I if you can either employ, I can employ nobody and just let the whole thing crash, or I can employ some people and just kind of keep this thing going. And unfortunately, that's part of being part of a commodity business, is it has ups and downs to it.
And that's the thing, though, man. It's not personal. It has nothing to it doesn't reflect. I mean, obviously, there's some cases it does reflect on the personnel, but the majority of the time, it doesn't reflect on the personnel. It sucks. It's an ego hit. You know what I mean? And you got to get past that.
Yep.
I mean, everyone's in not the same boat, the same storm. You just got to get past that.
No, I agree. And you keep going. And so especially a commodity-based business, it's demand driven. And so when demand drops dramatically for some weird, unforeseen reason, like a global pandemic.
Thanks, news.
Well, I mean, what am I supposed to do? And so it's not personal, and you just reset and find a way forward. That's right.
So the financial backers came in. They said, hey, we're consolidating. So you're at Scala. Your wife now is an attorney.
That's right.
Right. Fort Benton County still?
That's right. And so my wife, so here's the plug.
First off, if you're listening out there, understand that I remember it's Fort Bend County from years ago. All right. He didn't tell me that before.
No, that's true. You're doing really good.
Yeah.
This is a good test. And so my wife is a district attorney in Fort Bend County.
Right.
She's an incredible attorney, and she works very hard. And a wonderful mother and wife. And anyways, I'm going to see if she's listening.
Brownie points right now.
Yes, I need some.
Well, first off, that's major brownie points. Oh, wonderful wife, mother. She's great at driving. She's hilarious.
So just a couple of background is I told her I was going to do this, and she says, look, I'm going to listen to the podcast, and I'm going to make fun of you immediately afterwards. So this is a test. Number one, are you listening? And number two is you have to find a reason to make fun of me afterwards. I feel like it's going okay.
It's going okay so far. We'll get
okay.
there. We'll get there. You shellfish allergic. Okay, so they come in. It's May. It's times are. I mean, oil got to negative $37 3 weeks before. Everyone thought the oil industry is over pretty much. Like you're seeing layoffs on LinkedIn. You're seeing people looking for work. The green circle starts coming up. Open for work. Doom and gloom. And suddenly you get hit with this news.
No, that's right. And it's absolutely a punch to the gut. I agree with that. I mean, it's
well, how did you process that?
It was hard. And I drank some. And
I think everyone drank.
I talked to a lot of people. And,
yeah.
And so, it was just a reality. And so I got it, and it's trying to figure out what to do next. And so let's say it's happened. So it's over. And so I'm kind of in a transition period.
Yeah.
And the first thing I did was, which I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I started calling people and being like, look, this happened. And what are you seeing? And what do you think? And this industry and these people in it were all very sympathetic and helpful, and like, look, I don't have any good answer for you other than that sucks.
What was your objective? Just pick up the phone and start reaching out to connections, or were you calling old connections or making new connections? What?
It was mostly people that I had talked to before,
okay,
which is great. So I was glad I was more of a technical role, but to some degree business development. So I got a chance to at least talk to some people, which is wonderful. So I had not even a Rolodex, but at least some people to call to start with,
Yeah, exactly.
which is better than a lot, which is like if you're in just a technical role, sometimes it's hard to reach out and talk to people, and
You know what's
that's
funny?
not fair. But
I'm not going on a tangent here, but I kind of am. I remember, some previous roles I had. I felt like, okay, well, I'm in this role. I don't need to network. I'm like, what's the point of networking? You know what I mean? Like, I got this role and all that stuff. But at the same time, it's like, just because you're satisfied in a role or just because you don't see yourself going anywhere, you see yourself evolving with that company, it's so important to continue to build networks because number one, you don't know what's coming down the line. You know what I mean? Number two, you don't know where this one connection could help you out or you can help them out, And number three, it's just good to pick up the phone and meet new people and talk to people.
Agreed. So I'm a natural introvert, and so my ability to actually reach out and talk to people, I mean, I'm sure is terrible, but I've had to work on it. It's important. It matters. The other thing there's an article I read the other day that talked about the United States and our flexible labor market, which is great. But the other side of that is in the United States, you usually don't, despite what your parents did, usually don't make it past about 4.5 years. It doesn't matter the industry, whether it's ours or somebody else's, without having something happen.
What do you mean?
Whether that's where you switch jobs or there's a new owner or something else. I guess
something that's kind of
you don't get to be 20 years in a job and be like, this is fine. You get about, on the average, in the United States, you get 4 to 5 years.
See, that's very interesting. I had a podcast. I recorded a podcast this morning with Nina Spencer, and we were talking about like tenure at companies. Like back in our parents' times, like my dad was at PwC for 30, 35 years. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure your dad was at a place a long time. Like the whole being at a one company for a long time, 7+ years, 10 years, 15, 20 years, that's not the case anymore in our generation. You know what I mean? Like it's people are leaving, 2 to 4 years, 4 to 6 years. I mean, the movement is more common than it was before in previous generation times.
No, that's right. And so the argument is, look, you get, even in the United States, despite the industry, you get 4.5 years is the average, despite the industry. And that's it. And then, so you shouldn't expect more than 4.5 years before something happens, whether that's somebody buys your company or there's some kind of a change that you have to adapt to. And there's arguments for and against that on, well, that's not good because, you should have a job versus a flexible labor market, and that's all fine. But the point is, change is happening.
But
every 4 to 5 years.
Change always happens.
That's right.
And the thing is, though, you can either clamp down and hold on to the past or what you've done before.
That's right.
But at the same time, I mean, it's regardless whether you like it or not, it's coming your way.
No, that's right.
And you have to
at least on average, at least every 4 to 5 years.
And you have to look at it. You have to look at it as opportunity versus like, oh shit, like, oh my god, change is coming. I'm
and it's
nervous.
okay. That's
it's
right.
Okay.
That's right.
Change is natural. Change is life.
And so BD, and I say BD, but even from an introvert, talking to people matters. Like people matter.
I love how you're an introvert in BD, by the way.
Yes,
I love that.
There's no reason. Yes, I totally agree.
So you're at the house, you're picking up the phone, you're calling old connections, you're reaching out to new connections as well.
Yeah, to some degree, that's right.
And are you looking? What is your objective for these calls?
I'd like to. My objective is to understand the market, to get a feel for where they see hiring personnel, where they see it headed. And for the most part, it felt like sympathy, but I can't do anything for you. I mean, at the time, everybody was either hunkered down or letting people go, unfortunately.
Synergies. Right.
That's right. So synergy. So through M&A, I'm going to combine with this company and let 500 million of G&A go or whatever the answer was. And so how do you deal with that? And so I kept working. I kept making a lot of phone calls. I kept a spreadsheet of people I called and when and what we talked about. And again, my wife made fun of me a lot, which is fine. It's probably deserved. But
by the way, it sounds like a very scary household to walk into if you're always walking to get roasted.
Sure.
You're always getting roasted when you walk in the door.
No, my wife is nice.
I love your wife. I'm joking around.
She's the nicest person I know. I have no idea why we're married, but I pulled it off somehow. I don't want to question it. But and so at some point, after doing all this work, and not to say that it was because of my work or because of some divine intervention or whatever else, but I got an opportunity, which was incredible, which was which is where I'm at now, which is Vencer Energy. And so we are backed by a company called VTOL Group. And so Don Dotson is our CEO and did all the hard work in raising the money.
Okay.
And he was just getting ready to get kicked off and start looking for opportunities. And something happened, and the guy that was in my role kind of stepped out, and he says, like, I got to fill this role very quickly. Um, and there's a lot of background behind that, but anyways, and so I got an opportunity through connections and through people I knew.
That's what I was going to
people
ask you. That's what I was going to ask you. I mean, so that connection, this opportunity that popped up, it was through networking. It was through making calls. It was through putting yourself out there and being vulnerable and being, hey, look, yeah, I'm curious if you have something, like I'd love to talk about it.
That's right. And so, again, I don't think it's any kind of personal worth type thing other than just try. You have to try.
Yeah.
I mean, and so I got this opportunity. I talked to Don at the time, who had somebody else was in my role, step out, and he said, look, I need to fill this role quickly. We had a conversation. We meshed well from a personality standpoint.
Okay.
We meshed well from a viewpoint and a life standpoint. And he said, look, I think you should step in and fill this. And so we did. And it was amazing. Like all of a sudden, it just happened all of a sudden. So it happened to like look zero opportunities. Like I have no chances. Like I don't know how I'm going to get a job. To like you're the guy. Like I think you should step in.
Was this like a major step for you, or was it like is this stuff that you were already doing previously, or was this one of those things? It's like, man, I kind of did this a little bit. This is a lot more responsibility, but I'm just going to jump in and swim. Like I'm going to make it work. Or was it something like, yeah, I know how to do this?
No, I think it was stuff I knew how to do. I think it was stuff I'd done previously, and so at Scala and through working through Alan May and other people, like I knew what I was like. I knew how to do it, but it's people that had stepped out of that role. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I'd already done. Like I can tell you, like
so you're comfortable with it.
I'm comfortable with it. I know how to do this. Don stepped in and said, "Look, I needed somebody to fill this role," and it was the perfect fit, actually, from a personality standpoint, from everything else I could think of standpoint. Is like this works. Like we should get together. I can step in and fill this role.
Isn't that a great feeling when it just jives?
Yes, and so it's a great feeling. And again, it's not. I like to think it's like because I did all this hard work, but I think that's true. I mean, that's part of it, but it's because also somebody steps in and says, hey, this is good. Like this fits. And so Don Dotson, and I'll give my plug now, I'm sorry, but so Don Dotson did all the hard work at raising the money with a company called VTOL. So VTOL is actually the largest commodities trading group in the United States.
Okay.
And even in the world, actually. And so they trade 8 million barrels a day of crude. And so of 100 billion barrels a day that actually gets consumed or traded in the world,
they're doing almost 10%.
They traded 8 or 9, almost 10% of it.
That's insane.
And in the United States, they trade about 1 million barrels a day. That's a lot of crude.
Yeah.
And so they looked at the market and said, like, I don't think this stuff's going away. Yeah, renewables is great and all these things are happening, but this is a good time to actually get into the business, especially the U.S. onshore business. And so, and through that, they would like to invest through a company called Vencer, which is where I'm at now, and through Don Dotson. And so that's what we're doing. And so we are through Don and me jumping in at the right time is we're looking for PDP heavy assets. We're basin agnostic, hydrocarbon mix agnostic. And we like to invest in the U.S. onshore space through VTOL.
Okay.
In the matter of kind of 500 million to maybe 2 to 3 billion range. And that's cash or equity at the time, or equity basically. So it's not like we'll give you stock and you can kind of work through it. Like, I mean, people believe in this industry and that it's not going away as quickly as people think. And
well, it's not going away as quickly as the news will say or anything like that. But I mean, so let me ask you a question though. So you were kind of doing this similar role at Scala, JP. Relax, Drew, chill out. Anyway, so you're doing a similar role at Scala, whatever, and then you go over there. How different was the environment when it comes to, looking at deals, going to data rooms and all that stuff currently versus what it was 11, 12 months ago? If you can speak to that. If you can't, no worries. I'll keep the conversation going. You tell me.
No, I thought last year was hard. I thought 2020 was hard. So we're getting started up. We're trying to find ways to get in.
And when did you go over there?
So roughly July
July. Okay.
July 2020.
Okay. So right in the thick of it.
Yeah, right in the middle of COVID and everything else,
Yeah.
and all the other weird
Shit.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
I got you. I'll
stuff
say
going
it. I'll say it.
And so, I said, anyways, and in the middle of all these things going on, I thought even 2020 was hard, which was just, look, we're going to hunker down and maybe we find a way to do something, but like we're just going to try to find a way to survive.
Right.
To most recently, we are still have the same hypothesis, which is like we'd like to spend through VTOL 500 million to 2 billion plus in equity or cash in the upstream business. But it looks way different. Like I think people are more open to it. They understand like we've made it through an election season. We've made it through a lot of things, and this is a reality going forward. And we still believe in this business. It's not that these other things are great, which is renewables and all these other things which will grow and are
Oh,
fine.
they will, and I'm fine with that. I love that.
But this idea that you can replace 100 million barrels a day of energy, think about just the energy content of 100 million barrels a day of oil production, and that we can replace that immediately with renewables. It's just not true. And so there's a transition that happens here. And so I think that's our point, and working for Don and through Vital's point that, look, oil and gas is still here. It still makes sense. It's not negative. It's not evil. It still fits with what you need to kind of progress to the next step.
Drew, that's been the biggest frustration, I feel like. I mean, it's actually, there's a lot of frustrations right now, but I feel like that's been a focal point on frustrations. It's not, in my opinion, I've never met one person, one man or woman in the oil and gas industry that says that's against renewables, that's against green energy, that's against solar, wind, or whatever that is. But what we are against is the lack of realistic stories or truth that comes as, like, it's not easy to switch over from, you're not going to take an intercontinental airplane and switch that over to solar and call it a day and all that stuff. So it's more of a question of, it's not renewables versus fossil. It's not a battle. You know what I mean? We coexist right now. The thing what's frustrating is, like, people, I'm on a couple text threads, and then they're like, oh, let's switch over to, yay, renewables tomorrow. It's like, hey, I'm all for that. Don't get me wrong, but the technology is not there. So let's stop acting like it is and put this false narrative out there that's not true, because the technology is not there. That just steps in and replaces the low cost, energy efficient fossil fuels provide.
No, I think that's right. And there's not a lot of, I don't think you'll meet a lot of people in the E&P industry that says, look, we don't like any competition and we should just, competition is fine.
Oh, yeah.
I think renewables are real and is a definite growth industry. But when I look at the amount of industry or the amount of energy that has to be accounted for going forward, it's crazy, and I don't know how you do that without oil and gas.
But let me ask you a question though. How do you tell that story? I mean, how do you communicate the energy requirements and what oil and gas can do, what hydrocarbons can do? I mean, how do you communicate as an industry to that narrative? I mean, what can we do?
I mean, that's a good question, and so
thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And so I've read a couple. It's especially from the time I was at Scala and off, and then joined Vencer. I looked at kind of what does renewables really look like, and it is an incredible industry, and it is a 5 to 6% subsidized return.
Okay.
But can it really fill all the gaps we're talking about? I don't think the answer is yes. And so some rationale around that is, we have roughly 8 billion people a day, or 8 billion people in the world today. But the projections are that we're going to have roughly 11 to 12 billion people in the next, I don't know, call it by 2050, that still need energy.
Yes.
Still need, all these things.
Affordable energy.
Affordable energy. And so that's great. And I think renewables fill part of that, but is renewable fully renewable? And by that I mean,
Are the batteries made in a car that you plug in the wall? I mean, can you actually
That's right.
dispose it? No. I mean,
That's
you
right.
have to
And so
mine for that stuff. I mean, the picture, the life cycle picture is not there.
that's right. And so wind and solar is great, but wind and solar, but I have to take wind and solar and I have to take it, I have to absorb it, and then I have to transmit it across an electrical line
Yeah.
to all these end users. That's not renewable. Like that takes lithium, that takes mining, that takes all these things that are not renewable.
But that's the tough conversations we get in because it's not like facts don't win conversations these days.
Yeah, that's right.
Facts and data are not drivers of winning the hearts and minds of people that are against fossil fuels or against the oil and gas industry just because what they read on an article or something like that, right?
No, that's right. I
So,
agree.
so how do you communicate with? Well, actually, the lithium battery takes X amount of time or you have to do this. That's not going to win arguments. It's not going to convince people, right? So,
No,
my question is, what can we do? What can we do sitting across besides pointing the facts out? How can we have that engage in those conversations with people?
no, I agree. I think, like you said, anybody in the oil and gas industry doesn't say, "Oh, renewables are bad." That's not
Right.
true. Like we think competition is fine,
Absolutely.
and I think renewables is a growth industry. And I think it's absolutely a path to the future. But this idea that you can meet all the energy needs of the world, especially the growth of the world, and then
Tomorrow.
tomorrow, and even in the next 30 to 50 years, Colin,
Yeah.
and meet it in such a way that, anyways,
I know.
it's
I get it.
even
It's
to
frustrating.
expand beyond energy poverty and all these other things that are happening that, so yeah, I mean, and so I think part of the argument from the third world or from Southeast Asia or
Yeah.
whatever else would say, yeah, yeah, you guys are great, and I know you're saying do green energy, and that's great, but you kind of went through the buffet line and filled up your plate, and then
Here we are trying to build.
yeah, you're telling us what to do,
You know what's
and
interesting? I just did a podcast 2 days ago with Jasper Camacho. I know this guy in college, and very smart guy, and he's over in Singapore, and he's providing energy, actual affordable, efficient energy to these third world countries, right? And it's not one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, well, we're put up wind farms. I mean, he was talking like, hey, look, their main source is still coal. You know what I mean? Like it's just because we're sitting here in this bubble in the U.S. bubble of like, oh well, let's go renewable. Like look at California doing brownouts and blackouts and all that stuff. It's like, but there's certain places in the country that we're not involved that we don't see that rely on affordable energy to heat their homes, cool their food, cool their families, and it's the renewable side isn't there. Like it's great to do all like, oh yeah, renewable, but if the technology's not there, and it's not going to be cost efficient.
agreed. And I think it grows, but renewables is not renewable. I mean, wind and solar is renewable, but the ability to capture that and transmit it across the electrical grid, it
Right.
looks different.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
this idea that you have this whole thing figured out, and that you can do this without crippling the world economy and all these other things is just not true.
Yeah.
And so this idea that we are an evil organization that's bent on warming the globe is just not true. And the other angle on that is that we are a cheap alternative to bring people out of energy poverty. I mean, it's not just about North
What's
America.
energy poverty?
Energy poverty being a lot of people, a lot of the world, and up to 1 billion people. I read a book called Factfulness, but there's a large group of people that don't have the type of electrical basis or energy or whatever else, where a lot of people will still burn dung or
Yeah.
whatever else it is just to have your basic heating needs covered, not let alone like just run a refrigerator or whatever else it is. And so as these people come out of that, not to mention the additional 2 or 3 billion people that probably exist on the world despite what we have now, so
Yeah.
we go from 8 or 9 to 12, and then them coming out of energy poverty, how are you going to cover that?
Yeah.
Are you really think you're going to cover that with renewables?
Yeah.
I don't think that's true. I
It's
don't think that's
maybe
true.
one day, but we're not there yet
And that's
as
the
a
argument.
society.
No, and so that's the argument. So this idea that this is just an evil organization, that's not true. I mean, there's a lot to do in the near term and over the next 50 years of what oil and gas can help out on both an energy poverty level, from just helping people take the next step out of, look, I can live life better level. I mean, this is, anyways, it's not just.
We do such a bad job as an industry. Number one, communicating what we do, because don't look, the stereotype of our industry it's roughnecks throwing chains. It's, because, the whole Black Gold show. It's like, oh yeah, pollute this, pollute that. We don't care and all that stuff. The advances we've made when it comes to an ESG, yeah, when it comes to our environmental impact and what we do, and not only that. This is kind of want to segue the next conversation we're going to have is when it comes to the charitable work that we do as an industry that you're seeing from Houston. We talked about this before when we were sitting in the room, and kind of just catching up and all that stuff. And you mentioned something about the amount of charitable people in the oil and gas industry in Houston that you see, that you're exposed to. And we just a bad story about talking about that. So if you don't mind, I mean, tell me about kind of things that kind of you're involved in and that we discussed earlier about, I guess, when it comes to giving back to the community.
That's right. So I mean, luckily, I'm involved in a couple different organizations to give back. One is the Society of Petroleum Engineers, SPE.
Right.
I'm in a business development group there, and SPE is a 501c3 slash just general charitable organization that tries to help out that helps out with STEM programs and scholarships and everything else. But basically, the people I've talked to, this is one of the most charitable organizations, groups you'll be involved with. So, I mean, people look at the oil and gas industry, they're just in it for the money, they don't care about anybody. But the amount that they give back to both Houston and the community and everything else is incredible.
Right.
I mean, they look back and say, look, how can I help the person behind me? I think most of the people you talk to in this industry will look back and say, how can I help the people that are behind me? How can I help them take steps forward? How can I help my community in general? I'm not sure that's true everywhere. And so SPE is one I'm involved with. So it's kind of the SPE Business Development Group. And so, again, SPE being a charitable organization that gives back on, like I said, STEM programs, so just scholarships, everything else you can imagine.
Yeah. No, we had that around the Rotary here with a couple of SPE presidents from various schools, whether it's U of H, Colorado School of Mines, and Texas A&M University. And we brought in operators. You know what I mean? It's such a good, it's a great organization because it connects people all levels of our industry. You know what I mean? That's what I love about it.
No, agreed. And so I think SPE is great. I'm lucky and happy to be involved with that, and from a business development standpoint or anything else. But this group, the oil and gas industry, Houston, loves to give back. I mean, I know that doesn't maybe come across all the time, or I'm just not sure based on with other people I talk to, that's true everywhere else.
Right.
I mean, and by give back, I mean give back in a very big way.
And it's not just writing a check either. It's people's time, it's people's effort, it's people's weekends, it's people's weekdays. Yeah,
that's right. And whether that's a Houston Food Bank or whether that is a scholarship program or whatever else that is, they just want to help.
Yeah.
And so I love Houston and oil and gas, and that people are happy to be around people that are down to earth, that love to have dirt under their fingernails, that they love to get to work, and they love to help people.
Well, what are some of the ways that people listening right now could help SPE? Because I remember we did that round table, and we had somebody chime in from NOV and FESCO and all these other companies like, man, I'd love to host a tour for the student chapter. I'd love to do this. How can people that are listening right now reach out and I guess kind of help the Houston SPE chapter, or help whatever chapter, wherever they're listening?
Oh, that's right. And so a couple of different ways is...
Great question, JP.
Yeah, great question, JP. So I am involved with the SPE Gulf Coast Section Business Development Group. Mm-hmm. And frankly, if you just join a meeting, like that fee that you base, that fee that they charge to join the meeting, let's call it $20 to $50,
Yeah.
goes towards scholarships. Like all that revenue or anything that they do as revenue minus expenses goes towards helping people.
I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the standard bullshit. I'm going to sign up for this. I'm talking about the real stuff. I mean, how can people help? I mean, the mentorship roles or the site tours or the speaking, like the attendance. How can people help?
That's right. So one is attending. Two is there's a lot of members in transition and other things, but it's gosh, this is a hard question, but really being involved. I mean, people are in a weird transition now. This has been a
Yes.
weird year. So
Absolutely.
if you're just involved and helpful and give people an opportunity to kind of reset and go into next year with here's how I can help. I don't think I'm really answering your question, but just being involved at any capacity of SPE, I think helps. Number one, just because of how they're set up. So any contributions you do there help. For example, the SPE Business Development Group, we're going to the Houston Food Bank. Instead of a meeting next month, so February, we were going to the Houston Food Bank and we're going to just volunteer and
That's awesome.
give out meals. And so come join us, and that helps
When are
people.
you doing that in February?
Oh, I need to send that out. I have a date. I know the date. I can't think of it in my head.
No, it's not. You're on the spot. You're on the spot. This is your first podcast. Don't worry
So
about it.
if you look at the Houston SPE, so SPE Gulf Coast Section Business Development Group, in February, we are doing a Houston Food Bank service project.
Is Cody going to be there?
I hope Cody's there.
I'll tell you what. I'm going to show up. I'm going to be there.
As long as Cody's there, that's right.
No. Cody, if you're listening, I'm going to be there.
So this is Cody Rodriguez. He's a previous, he's a round the Rotary type of person.
He's
right?
a round the Rotary previous guest, man.
That's
great
right.
guy,
So
great cat. Love the guy.
He's a workout partner of mine, and so he actually shows up at my house or mine and his at various times. And so this is the test to see if he actually is listening to this.
This is the true friendship test.
This is the friendship test. I agree. And so
you always got to test friendships.
I promise that if you show up, Cody will be there. You'll get to meet him, and that'll be wonderful. And so,
but I mean, that's such a good cause, though. I mean, you the chapter's going out there. I mean, you're helping the community.
That's right.
It's not a lot of that type of things are not focused on. You know what I mean? Just because that's what we do. That's just
right.
what we do. But we need to be telling those stories.
No, that's right. And we're not very good at it.
No, we're the worst at it. And we fight arguments with logic and data. You know what I mean? We fight arguments like engineers, and people are not everyone's an engineer.
No, nobody cares. I agree.
Exactly.
But we're a very generous industry, and it feels weird to say that, but it's true.
But going back to that, like, how can I help and all that stuff? It's not one of those things. Maybe you don't have the answer, but maybe it's someone that comes to a meeting and they're like, oh shit, I can take a handful of these people and do this at our facility, or I can take this one person and help mentor them, or there's those ideas of how you can help SB and the younger generation. It's kind of, it can be organic, it can be individual. You know what I mean? I mean, you can take someone under your wing and just talk to them, meet them for coffee once every 3 weeks.
No, I agree. There's lots of ways to help. This industry is full of people that are willing to help, which I think is different than a lot of industries. And there's lots of ways to do it. I mean, whether that's serving through SPE, other charitable organizations, and I know the industry's.
And we talked about, so we had Nina Spencer on. She talked about CASA, the child advocate thing, and you knew about that.
No, that's right. And so whether it's through just being here in Houston and through a very charitable general group, which is basically oil and gas, which I think is a charitable group of people, or through my church or whatever else, like there's a lot of ways to help people. Yeah. Whether that's through money, but it's not just money. It's about time. It's about like CASA. I mean, it's a money is great, but they really want your time and to volunteer and to help people. And that's
I guarantee you probably get more fulfillment out of that on a personal level. And not only that, but on an impactful level to other people's lives if you do time versus just writing a check and just sending it off.
Agreed.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And
you're on, I mean, we're coming to an hour right now. We got some steaks to cook and we got some wine to open like we normally do. Not normally, but occasionally around the Ready podcast. Right. So that being said, you're on the University of Oklahoma Advisory Board and you're sitting there and so you're talking to the future generations. And so there's some questions of, should I pursue a career in oil and gas? Should I not? I mean, what are you telling people these days, this point in time? And we're recording this mid-January 2021. How would you advise people that are listening to this that that may be curious about entering the oil and gas industry, maybe think about leaving? I mean, what are you telling people?
No, it's a fair question. And when I look at, we talked a little bit about energy poverty and some of these other things going on, but when I look at the amount of energy demand and what has to happen in the world over the next 20 to 50 years, the idea that you can accomplish all that without oil and gas, I just don't believe to be true.
Right.
And so I'm looking at that, especially if you go from, what are we, 8 billion people now to roughly 12 billion people, which we think is maybe the max that we kind of max out in the next 2050. Like, you need energy.
Yeah.
And so I think there's competition from that. I think renewables matter. I think the idea that we find more efficient ways to capture carbon matters. Like, I think that's all real. This idea that you can't do that in oil and gas and then it's done in the next 5 years and it's gone, I just don't believe that to be true.
But what are you telling people that are specifically saying, hey, Drew, like, should I enter the oil and gas industry right now? I got a mechanical engineering major. Should I enter the oil and gas industry, or is my time better spent somewhere else? What are you telling people to follow?
No, it's fair. And I think it's, again, as I'm looking at the next 30 years, so call it 2050, and that's a lot of people are calling net zero in 2050. I'm saying you can't accomplish that without oil and gas.
It sounds fun.
And so it sounds fun and it's interesting, and so maybe like, if you want to hedge a little bit, you can talk about being an energy engineer, and there's different things that I can do. But oil and gas is still necessary and absolutely part of the equation. And whether you're talking about carbon capture or whether you're talking about whatever else it is, the ability to manage these large energy projects, petroleum engineering and this path forward still matters over the next 30 years. It's not going away.
Right.
It's an important part of it. And from an energy poverty standpoint, from lots of other aspects you can think of, this still matters.
But that being said, I mean, I know a lot of people have pursued the oil and gas industry because, there's that whole like, oh yeah, big paychecks, big this, big that. I mean, at the end of the day, that's not going to drive happiness. That's not going to drive fulfillment or satisfaction in your career or in your personal life, right? So if you're listening and you want to hop in the oil and gas industry just because you think there's a high paycheck, first off, think again, buddy boy. But you tell me. I would refrain from following just the money. I would say you probably want to follow something you're passionate about, that you get involved in, that you get attracted to, and you'd want to work on something like that. In your off time, the weekends, like, follow your passion.
No, that's right. And so I'm going to be honest. When I was in college, the idea that, number one, this was a job and this was a decent paying job was absolutely a factor in that. Like, that started it out. But after I got in and worked for enough years, it just doesn't matter. I mean, life is too short to be miserable all the time.
Amen.
So you should do stuff that is fun and you think is impactful in the world and whatever else. And I have found all those things in oil and gas, if I'm being honest with you. I think it's fun. I think it's still impactful from an energy demand and from helping people standpoint, from being in Houston. And so I found a lot of things, but there's a certain minimum amount. I agree you need to take care of your family, but I think that's accomplished in a lot of different reasons. But other than that, yes, I think oil and gas is a great place to find a passion, to find a way to take care of your family, to find a way to help people, to find something that's interesting, all of those things. And this idea that you're going to get rich, yeah, maybe not. Life's weird, but it's a great place to be.
It absolutely is.
That's true.
It absolutely is. And that's the thing, though. It's like, follow what you want, follow your passion. And just because, let's say, the paycheck isn't there the first week you do it, I started this baking company, I'm not going to get paid. Do what you love.
Agreed.
And look, even if it doesn't take care of itself down the road, at least you're happy and you're not miserable, stressed, and you die of a stroke because you're miserable.
Agreed.
And you're working for people you don't want to work with.
Agreed.
So that's my point. So what else do you want to talk about? Shellfish?
So I am allergic to shellfish.
Yeah, I know you are.
So we've been to lunch several times, and you said, "Hey, do you want shellfish?" And I said, "No, I don't want shellfish."
Do you remember my first joke? This is before your first child was here.
Yeah, this is. It's a selfish. It's related to selfish to shellfish.
Well, don't give the punchline.
No, I ruined it for you. Absolutely.
Yeah, you did. You actually killed it. So Drew and I met, and we're at a local pour. It was a local
No,
port
that's
in
right.
Houston.
That's
It's
right.
been knocked down since, and we're kind of sitting there, and he's like allergic. He tells me he's allergic to shellfish because I'm at the order the crab nachos or whatever. And I said, you know that lobsters are actually the least popular creature in the ocean. And Drew's like, what? No shit. Why? Why is that? I didn't know that. I always thought the barracuda was. Of course, he gives some scientific facts. I'm like, no, lobsters are. He's like, why? I'm like, well, because they're so shellfish. And I think I've used that joke with you every time we've met.
No, it's
since
worked.
then.
It's the reason we're still friends. For sure.
I got to work it in all the time. I got to work it all the time. All right, so let's give one plug to Cody to make sure he's listening the entire way through.
So Cody Rodriguez and Iron Orchard, and then we work. It's my workout partner in the morning. So I'm gonna see if he brings us up or not. So it'll be see if he's listening or not.
Do you outwork out him, or does he outwork out you?
I'll let him say that. I think.
No, you tell me. He's not here in the
No,
studio.
I think I'm absolutely the winner.
Okay. All right.
We'll see if
so
that's true.
Okay, so
This is a good plug to see if that's true.
Okay, well, now he's going to hear this potentially.
Potentially.
And if he doesn't work those extra reps, then you know he didn't listen to this.
Agreed. He's lazy. Agreed.
And your wife.
And my wife, who I told her I was going on this, and she says, "You shouldn't be on a podcast. You're very boring."
You are. So am I.
Yes.
I'm boring too. I don't give a shit though. There's nothing else to do, right? What are we gonna do? Go out and work right now? Might as well sit around the corner and get on the podcast.
No, I agree.
What am I gonna go sell something?
And so I'm really just interested to see if, after saying this, if she comes back and say, "Yeah, like you were less boring than I thought. It wasn't great, but you did okay."
You know what's bullshit? That you need a podcast to show your wife that you're not boring. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
But you know what? That is the main goal of this podcast, to connect relationships again and make marriages strong and happy again, and make people realize what they see in their spouses.
I totally agree.
So that's what you're here for.
We have a date night Friday. I think I'm going to use this.
Where are you going?
I don't know.
Well, okay, you got 2 children.
Yes.
One on the way.
Yes.
What is your date? What is the ideal date night 2021?
It's literally just being able to sit quietly for several hours without a child.
Not even talking to your spouse. That is a great date night. Yeah. She's going to hear this. She's mad at you. She's mad at you about that.
Oh, for sure.
So sitting quietly for hours is an ideal date night.
It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I think she probably has other expectations.
No, for sure. We're gonna have
a nice dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it'll be a nice dinner and drinks, but
not talking the entire time.
For sure. We'll
I dig that.
Quietly.
I dig that. I like that. Sure. So anyway, Drew, you got anything else you want to bring up on this episode right now?
No, this is awesome. I appreciate you for having me.
Well, I'm glad you're here, buddy. And you gave me the biggest bullshit when you walked in. I bought a bottle of scotch, but I left it at the house.
Yeah, you usually have pictures of people that provide you with scotch, and
first off,
I think I could do that, but I failed.
It's kind of grown on its own. Like, I've never requested or asked for anything like that, but it's kind of the fact that it happens. Yeah. It's one of those things. I'm keeping my mouth shut. Like,
it's the most amazing.
Cool.
It's the most amazing thing that's ever happened. I'm like, I got to figure out in my personal life, how do I get to a scenario where when I invite people over, they just bring me scotch.
Dude, I got a buddy that does commercial real estate, builds commercial apartments, all that stuff. He's like, hey, I think I need to start a podcast. I mean, you got a pretty good gig over there. I'm like, I don't know how it happened, but I love how the path it's gone.
For sure.
Anyway, Drew, I appreciate everyone. This is Drew Limbacher, the Vice President of Business Development, an introvert at Business Development and Engineering at Vencer Energy. And Drew, I love your story. I love how the fact that you have that where you want to jump in on the entrepreneurial side of things and your involvement with SPE. Again, everyone, you can reach out to Drew and just find out how to get involved and sign up for the SPE Gulf Coast chapter.
That's right.
And just see what you can do. Even just meet the guy and talk to him. He's a great guy, even though he likes sitting there in silence, which is his ideal conversation, which I think is not true. But you can find him on LinkedIn and just kind of connect with him, just kind of engage in a conversation. Man, I appreciate you coming in. I know we got some steaks and some wine to open up, but let's get on that right now.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Until next time.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us on Around the Rotary.